Hello and a warm welcome to our special program where today we look at the journey of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. It's a very old organization which talks about the scientific temperament, how science has amalgamated with industry. There are a lot of issues which CSIR deals with, and in our special conversation today we have the Director General of CSIR, Dr. Shekhar C. Mande. I welcome you on the program. So if you talk about the time when CSIR was established way back in 1942, and when now you look at the journey up till 2020, how do you really see the journey?
So if you look at it, it's a very fascinating. The journey of CSIR is almost the same as the journey of India's development as a country. So CSIR essentially started initially as the Board of Scientific and Industrial Research, and that was eventually rechristened as CSIR. And on 26 September 1942, we came into being. So in that sense, we were the first publicly funded S&T organization in the country. All other publicly funded organizations are post-independence. What you have to realize is that that was the period in which many countries around the world were becoming independent. They were gaining independence from their foreign rule. About 60 or 70 countries must have become independent about the same time. India stands out amongst all these countries because we have made so much progress. We have our own independent atomic energy program, we have our own space program, and that is possible only because we adopted science and technology as the main driver of our society. And therefore CSIR is very proud that CSIR was involved in each of these processes during the development of the country. If you look at the major milestones over all these years, what do you think what are those sticking out major points of the milestones which the organization has reached? So maybe if you look at it after like 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. What I am rather fond of doing is dividing into periods.
Okay.
So when we became independent in 1947, that was among the most challenging periods ever the country would have faced, because we did not have any capacity to produce things on our own. Our industrial production was almost zero. We did not have very well developed agriculture, and we were just coming out of the very famous 1943 Bengal famine. So we had to make sure that our population gets access to all the facilities that are available elsewhere in the world. And it was a challenge. So there was a challenge to become self-dependent on many different areas. And from there came the Green Revolution, because of the food crisis that we were having, as all of us are proud of, which was essentially piloted by the ICAR and the IARI. But CSIR also contributed to the Green Revolution in terms of mechanization of agriculture. We made the first tractors in the country and made them available on a very large scale to many different people. We also made agri-pesticides and all. So that was a phase which lasted, I would say, for about first 20-30 years. Then came a small phase in which many countries around the world actually started looking at India as a potential threat, global threat. There is no need for doing that. But nonetheless, outcome of that was a denial of technologies to India, whether it be space, whether it be atomic energy and everything. And country had to become self-dependent on all these strategic areas. And once again, CSIR is very proud that CSIR contributed significantly to all these areas. I am told of the stories of Professor Satish Dhawan going to our lab very regularly in trying to see how we can actually adopt these technologies and make them available to space. And similarly, atomic energy or defense and all of them, CSIR was very intricately involved in development of those technologies. So the technology denial era was then followed up by a very interesting development in 1991, and I don't have to tell you, our viewers, what that development was. And all of a sudden we had to actually become part of the global world. And to become a part of the global world, it was very important that we bring awareness in the scientific community about things such as intellectual property, realization, and so on and so forth. So how do you protect our intellectual property rights? That's a very fundamental question which CSIR literally piloted the country through that particular phase. And you would be aware of the famous cases like Haldi and Basmati and all, that CSIR successfully fought in the international courts and made sure that India's intellectual property remain in India. So these are the kind of three rough phases that I can actually divide in the country, and we are very proud that CSIR has contributed at every stage of these different phases.
But Dr. Mande, whenever a country is in a developing stage, a lot of social processes also evolve along with it. So bringing together all the scientists, bringing together a scientific temperament in the country, how challenging was that during that period?
So thankfully what happens is that scientific temperament in India has always existed through centuries. You know, I mean, Indian society in general, the Westerners' perspective is very different. They think that we are a country of sapiras and magicians and so on and so forth. But if you look at upon ourselves in a very critical way, we are not. We have been a country which have actually followed scientific rituals extremely well. Science has been very well developed in the country, and whatever practices that have been followed, whether the hygiene practices or whatever, have been developed with particular rationale. And therefore it was not very difficult to bring in the realization of all these new concepts into the society based on S&T.
But now what is the next vision when you look at the future scenario? What is the next vision for CSIR?
So what CSIR actually looks at upon itself is a part of the larger S&T ecosystem in the country. You know, so on one hand, you have very well developed academic structure, infrastructure now, whether it be IITs or the IISc or the newly constituted ICERs and the universities and all. That's an infrastructure which is publicly funded academic institution. On the other hand, we have seen emergence of private institutions which are of fantastic nature, some of them. They are actually emerging educational institutions. On the third corner, if you look at, we have industries. And our role also is to interface academia with industry. CSI's one of the principal roles is to interface academia with industry. And the industry is actually coming forth very strongly now in adapting itself to all the modern changes. The buzzword that people use, Industry 4.0, AI, ML and all. So they're the thing that actually CSIR looks forward to, interfacing with industry. And then of course the ecosystem of the startups and all. On a very large scale, we have an innovation movement that is going on in the country right now. There's a turnover literally that is happening where our younger people, they have huge aspirations about making big them on their own. And CSIR also sees as a central role in promoting these younger entrepreneurs and trying to help them fulfill their aspirations and so on and so forth.
Dr. Mande, with the new developments happening and niche areas developing, are there also plans of adding more institutions and more institutes to the body of CSIR?
So at this stage, we don't have a direct plan of doing that. Okay. There are many challenges that we're actually looking at today's date. I mean, just to throw a few buzzwords here and there, we are looking at future of energy, for example. You know, I mean, we want to move away from fossil fuels, but what are the futuristic solutions for energy generation, storage and so on and so forth. We are looking at the environment, especially carbon capture and all. How we can actually utilize very successfully the carbon that is generated as a waste product of many different processes. We are looking at making the country Atmanirbhar. The Honorable Prime Minister has given a clarion call of making India Atmanirbhar in many different sectors. We are looking at those things. So these are the kind of challenges that we are actually looking at for the future. And for doing that, I don't think we really need new institutes to be floated. We can use the existing institution structure. We can try to bring industry and academia closer. So what we have started doing in the last few months or a year is we have actually started contacting industries very proactively. And I must say that all industrial houses whomsoever we have contacted are very enthusiastic in their participation for our futuristic programs. And I do see actually that in future more and more Indian academia would work closely with industry so that the solutions that emerge out of academic institutes can be easily implemented in the field by the industrial houses.
CSIR is a very big organization, and before I want to go to the break, just one question, Dr. Mande, that there are many people, and the people who are going to watch this program wouldn't know actually that who were the main scientists who've developed CSIR in such a big way. So obviously each and every scientist has contributed to this body, but if I were to ask you the paragons whom you remember over the various decades which you have, or rather the periods which you have discussed, so who were they?
So that's a very difficult proposition because invariably one misses out a few names, but having accepted the fallacy that I might actually miss a few names, and I would like to apologize to those people profoundly even before I take names. The first and foremost name, of course, is that of Shanti Bhatnagar, and also that of Ashutosh Mukherjee, because these are the people who actually set the ball going for CSIR, and some of these people actually really gave the vision of CSIR. So Ashutosh Mukherjee, of course, he's the prodigal son, is Shyama Prasad Mukherjee.
Okay.
And Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was the first vice president of CSIR, and Shanti Bhatnagar was the first director general. But they did so because there's a very proactive role played by a gentleman called Arcot Ramaswamy Mudliya.
Okay.
And he was a member of British Viceroy Council, and he actually propelled this thing. So that actually set the ball rolling for Bhatnagars and Mukherjees to come in and start the institutes. But then there are many people actually. So for example, Sir Ramnath Chopra, the person who wrote India's Drugs and Pharmaceutical Act, he was our first director of the RRL in Jammu. Then Janki Ammal was the first leading botany taxonomist. She worked in IIIM Jammu. CDRI Lucknow has been a pioneer in the drug development of the country. And there are a lot of people of that era, such as Dr. Nityanand,
right.
Dr. Dhawan, Dr. Dha, they helped in developing that. NL Bangalore was actually developed very proactively by many people. Naiduma, Professor Satish Dhawan himself played a major role there. And recently I dug out a photograph in which J.R.D. Tata is chairing a council meeting of NL, and that photograph almost has who is who of society. There is Bhatnagar, there is Sarabhai, there is J.R.D. Tata, and a whole lot of people actually.
Many people who've contributed to the story of CSIR, and as they say that the house is built brick by brick, so it goes without saying that not 2 or 3 scientists but a huge body of scientists have contributed to the success story of CSIR. Let's take a break at this point of time. When we return, we talk about the post-COVID scenario and what are the challenges before CSIR. Back in a moment.
India Science is an internet-based science TV channel initiated by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, implemented and managed by Vigyan Prasar. India Science on the URL www.indiascience.in is a bilingual channel with content in Hindi and English. It can be accessed on any internet-enabled device. This video platform is dedicated to science and technology knowledge dissemination with a strong commitment to spreading scientific awareness, especially with Indian perspectives, ethos and cultural context. The India Science mobile app can be downloaded from the Google Play Store and Apple Store.
Welcome back after the break, and we are in conversation with DG CSIR, Dr. Shekhar C. Mande. Dr. Mande, what has been the contribution of modern medicine as far as this entire pandemic, the fight against pandemic is concerned?
See, modern medicine works based on complete rational and observations with appropriate controls which are expected to work according to what they are, what we call as positive control and what we call as a negative control. Once we do that, then based on the complete rationale is we try to evolve either medicine or vaccines or diagnostics or whatever. Right? These are the three main things that we have arsenals to fight any disease. So if we were to actually follow development of a new drug, for example, against corona, that would be very tough given the time period, because a new drug development typically takes about 8 to 10 years for developing. And therefore what the modern medicine people have said is that rather than going for new drugs right now, we should look for repurposing of the drugs. The drugs which are already in market for treating some other disorders, but whether they can also be equally effective on COVID-19 or not. Hydroxychloroquine is of course many of you have heard.
It's already a pre-existing drug.
Correct. So because it's pre-existing drug, if it proves to be effective against corona, is an added point, and therefore we can actually try that. The same thing has happened to favipiravir, the same thing is happening to Abidol, and so on and so forth. So these are the drugs that people are actually trying to see whether they are effective against corona or not.
But how do we measure the success rate? Say for example, hydroxychloroquine, remdesivir, these are the medicines which the doctors are saying that it really proves fruitful, and it has a certain success rate. But the scientists say that 100% we are not sure whether it really works in the case of the COVID-19 patients. Does it, I want to understand from you, how does it work really?
So see, I mean, after all, it's all probabilities, right? I mean, you give the drug to 1,000 people, 10,000 people or 1 lakh people, how many people it has really worked effectively? Okay. And then we actually work on these probabilities and things like that. So remdesivir, for example, it is believed that it reduces the hospital stay. Instead of 15 days, it makes it 10 days. Okay. That's what the remdesivir does. Okay. You know, hydroxychloroquine, what is being projected as a prophylactic. Yeah. That is, you take the drug so that you don't develop very severe symptoms of the disease. Right. You know, something like that. So I mean, this kind of thing that we actually look at.
Dr. Mande, we are also making medicines out of the plant extracts. Now, what is that medicine on which CSIR is working currently?
Yes, so this is a very important point. You see, the modern medicine developed essentially in last 100 years. If you look at the history of modern medicine, it's only about 100 years history. But it's not that medicine did not exist prior to 100 years. And many countries had very rich traditions of medical practices. You know, Ayurveda is one such rich tradition. That also came from observational studies. Therefore, plants and other natural resources are also very good as medicinal practices. The US FDA gave approval to a category called botanical in 2005. And the Indian DCGI gave approval to the same category called phytopharmaceutical in 2015. So it's an extract of a plant that can be tried to alleviate a particular disorder. And CSIR is very proud that the first of the phytopharmaceutical trial it has undertaken in collaboration with Sun Pharma and in collaboration with International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. So it's a tripartite collaboration that we have piloted, and we are actually undergoing a trial right now for COVID-19 for this. This is the first phytopharmaceutical that has gone into clinical trial. There's some sort of a history in the making, and we are very proud of that.
So we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Mande, but let's take a break at this point of time and come back with lots more on the other side.
India Science is an internet-based science TV channel initiated by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, implemented and managed by Vigyan Prasar. India Science on the URL www.indiascience.in is a bilingual channel with content in Hindi and English. It can be accessed on any internet-enabled device. This video platform is dedicated to science and technology knowledge dissemination with a strong commitment to spreading scientific awareness, especially with Indian perspectives, ethos and cultural context. The India Science mobile app can be downloaded from the Google Play Store and Apple Store.
Welcome back. After the break, we are in conversation with Dr. Shekhar C. Mande on our Independence Day special. Dr. Mande, a lot of challenges because of the corona pandemic, which has swept the entire world. Now, what is the biggest challenge before CSIR right now in terms of the innovation, in terms of bringing in new research?
So what happened was, when COVID was upon us, as you know, India's first case was detected in late January. And already I gave a talk in Pune on 7th February in which I mentioned that we are staring at something which is very serious. So we were actually prepared from word go that we may have to prepare ourselves for COVID. On 25th and 26th February, we had a meeting of all the directors of CSIR in Goa, where we discussed how we are going to deal with the COVID situation. And therefore, we actually launched immediately, even before the WHO had declared it as a global pandemic, we launched our attack on COVID. So we divided ourselves on 5 different verticals that we are going to work on. The first vertical was surveillance, the second one was diagnostics, the third was interventions in terms of drugs and vaccines, the fourth one was on hospital devices, and the fifth one was generating supply chain models for all of these. And what I'm very glad to say is that the work that we began in March has already seen, a lot of them have seen good fruits already. So you would have heard, for example, that we developed 2 completely new diagnostic kits and benchmarked globally, and they should be in the field very soon. One which is based on a CRISPR-Cas system, one which is based on a what is called as a loop mediated isothermal amplification or LAMP, and both of them are being commercialized by 2 most respectable industrial houses in the country, the Tata Sons and the Reliance Industries. So they are going to commercialize this thing. But you would have read as early as last week, there is the 2nd or 3rd week of July, is there is a drug that has received approval for restricted emergency use called favipiravir.
Right.
And this drug is being marketed currently by Glenmark in India. But our lab in Hyderabad, there is the Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, also generated a process to synthesize favipiravir much more efficiently and in more cost-effective fashion. And for that, Cipla came forward to commercialize the process. And only day before yesterday, Cipla has announced that they will make the drug available at about 70% of the price that is available elsewhere. So already a price war has begun, and we hope that in the next couple of months, the price will come down even further. So the strength of...
What is the minimum price of the medicines you're expecting?
So as of date, Cipla, I believe, has announced 63 rupees for the tablet,
okay,
favipiravir. But as you know, that in the late 80s, when the HIV treatment was extraordinarily costly, unaffordable all over the world, at that time CSIR developed processes for HIV drugs. Cipla took them from us, and Cipla then made these drugs available all around the world, especially in sub-Saharan Africa and all those things. And that made India really famous, because we got a goodwill from a whole lot of countries for making these drugs available at very affordable prices. And what we are seeing now is history repeating itself. When the drugs around the world are very costly, our forte is to make these drugs very cheap. And that's what actually we have demonstrated in terms of favipiravir. And the same thing we are going to do with many other drugs for COVID-19.
Right. That's the story of the drugs. You're saying that you're expecting many drugs to come in the market, and they'll have a competitive pricing as well, due to which there will be a direct benefit to the common man. But what about the vaccine trial which has started, and how soon are we going to expect, or how earliest will be the vaccine which is going to be available for the people?
What I should say that the global perspective on vaccines, they are considered to be really 4 front runners on vaccines. The first of them is being promoted by a company called Moderna in US. That vaccine is based on the messenger RNA of the virus. The second one is that promoted by Oxford University and AstraZeneca together, that is based on adenoviral vector. And a similar one in concept, very similar one in concept, is by a Chinese company called CanSino. So these 2 are also as front runners as Moderna. And the fourth one that is being promoted by Pfizer along with a German biotech company. So these 4 are considered to be global front runners right now. And some of them actually also would start their trials in India. So some of the major Indian vaccine industry have come forward saying that they would also do trials in India for them, and which is a very good thing. What we should be very clear is that irrespective of wherever the vaccine is made or where the vaccine is discovered and shown to be successful, Indian companies are actually extremely capable of making these vaccines in a very high throughput manner and making them available. So we should be very proud that all the investments that have gone into generation of all these companies and supporting them is actually going to pay off very soon.
Right.
Whether it be drugs or vaccines or diagnostics or whatever.
Do we have a specified time period by which you can tell the audience that by by this month or by this year you will have a vaccine ready for the people?
You know, I mean, the process of making a new vaccine or process of making new drug is usually a very long process. And a long process because first you have to assess safety in humans. That anything that goes into a human body does not affect that particular individual adversely. That's the first and important thing to do, and that is generally done in phase 1 clinical trials. But then you also monitor these phase 1 trial people for some time to make sure that they don't show any adverse effect. But then you go into phase 2 and phase 3, in which you actually start looking at the efficacy of the vaccine, whether the vaccine provides the same kind of protection that is expected of it. And these processes are inherently long. So I would say that we should not really have expectation that something would be available by magic before this year end. Absolutely. Or perhaps by mid next year. So I don't think there is any magical solution to this. There's a long haul. We must be prepared for that. But we have other ways of actually protecting ourselves and we should follow them.
In terms of other protective gears and PPE equipments, how self-reliant are we, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's mantra is to gain self-reliance day by day. So in terms of PPE kits and other protective gears, how far have you really traveled as far as the self-reliance mantra goes?
So once again I will give you the overall country perspective. So what happened was when COVID came upon us, we were the net importers of all of this.
Right. And
it's a great thing to see that today not only we have become completely self-reliant on PPEs and all, but we have also started exporting some part of PPEs and other things. Now CSIR once again is very proud that our lab in Bangalore, the National Aerospace Laboratory, they generated PPEs on their own because they had a prior experience of using airman suit. See, airmen also use similar suits as PPEs, and they transferred the technology to a company in Bangalore, and that company on today's date is making something like 50,000 to a lakh suits per day.
Okay.
And in fact the company had just received an order from Brazil to supply 10 lakh suits to Brazil. So all of us have actually contributed to that. Our industries have responded extraordinarily well, especially Reliance Industries have responded extraordinarily well in making these PPEs, and that has gone in making country completely self-reliant, at least as far as the PPEs are concerned.
But sir, in terms of other milestones as far as the fight against corona is concerned, how satisfied are you in terms of research, in terms of academics, in terms of drugs and PPE kits we've spoken about? But there are a lot of other challenges in terms of spreading awareness amongst the people when it comes to physical distancing. Now, say for example, during the unlock phase, it seems people have become more careless. Now, what is the kind of role which really CSIR can bring in here at this point of time?
So from our side, what we are trying to do, and our effort has been to take efforts of CSIR in front of the public regularly.
Okay.
You know, so I have myself given numerous TV interviews on different aspects. As the different things started emerging, how does one protect oneself? Why does one need to wash our hands? Whether the virus is airborne or not? What are the new vaccines on the front? What are the new drugs on the front? So these are the kind of things. I have given a number of interviews to different TV channels, but we thought that we should also take our science and technology to public in their own native language.
Right.
So what we have attempted to do in the last 15 days is we have conducted sessions, online sessions in native languages. So we did once in Bangalore in Kannada, we did in Nagpur in Marathi, we did in Calcutta in Bengali, and as late as day before yesterday, we did in Delhi in Hindi. Okay. So all this, we are actually trying to take it to local people in their native languages. This week we have a session coming up in Hyderabad in Telugu. And till now, thankfully, because I speak all these 4 languages very well myself, I have participated myself in all these 4 local languages sessions. But we hope to take this in many different local languages and try to spread awareness amongst people. How does one save from COVID-19?
I'm sure the message will reach at the grassroots level and people will understand more, I mean, in a better fashion. But on the Independence Day, what is the kind of message you would really want to give the audience who are going to watch this program, who will actually see and understand what CSIR has done so far?
So I would like to give a message on behalf of the entire science and technology community in the country, rather than CSIR alone. We see ourselves as a partner in the entire ecosystem. And what I would like to say is that Honorable Prime Minister has already laid out a very well-defined role for all of us. We want to make India Atmanirbhar. And that should be one of the goals for all of us to pursue. What we realized during COVID is that for many of the critical items, we are dependent on some other countries. And God forbidden, there are some differences between the opinions between different countries. We should not be affected by them. So we should have capability of making everything on our own. Over and above that, if we want to import, it's fine, but we should not lose that capability. So this entire science and technology community in the country is with us. CSIR is a part of that in trying to make India Atmanirbhar in everything that we would do.
So as far as the contribution of CSIR goes, it has done its best. It's a long journey ahead and the goals will continue to be pursued. It was a pleasure talking to you, Dr. Mande, and wish you all viewers a very happy Independence Day. Thank you so much.